I heard about Einar in architecture school in Denmark. A static engineer had pointed out to me that somebody who would specialize in the topics I was interested in at the time, which was a sort of a fuller dome-like structure. This Icelandic person would be much more talented and able to help me than the architecture school in Denmark was at the time. So we met for the first time in Iceland, 96, with SIP so recently. But anyway, I mean, I came to your house and I was much impressed with the sort of exciting environment and the fantastic workspace Einar had. And we started talking about the problem that I had. Namely, I was about to do a sculpture which looked very much like a fullerish dome. And it was kind of something between a sculpture and a play scaffold or something like that in a landscape outside of a sort of in a landscaping project in Denmark. And I simply couldn't find anybody who could crunch that fuller mathematical principle, and it turned out that Einar was very capable of doing that. When we met, it was a very non-mystical and pragmatic saying that there is no doubt that Einar has a kind of toolbox which is very unique and exceptional for me. So it was not about me trying to learn what Einar could do, it was just a huge chance for me to actually express some of the ideas that I was working in with greater precision. Einar, I think, has an unbelievable ability to imagine a space without having to draw it up digitally, and he can speak about it with a certain efficiency that makes it tangible for me. So there is something which is very unique, because a lot of polyphonic shapes are very hard to talk about because the language with which we talk doesn't somehow embrace those shapes.
I have been bumping into people all my life. Like Fray Otto, he was a kind of a hero for us young architects in the old days in Germany. And then Buckminster Fuller, and finally I came close to Linus Pauling. And the difference between these people I've named and Olafur Eliasson is that I had never such a close relationship with these other persons before than with Olafur. And when we met the first time, I sensed what he was saying, that he was into experimentation. And this means something like a goodie for me, experimentation is good. At the beginning, Olafur has a very small studio, maybe how many, 3 or 4 or 5 people, and then we were actually going to the basis of things, and we were looking into new ideas, we were looking into ideas that we had at our disposal, and maybe we could use them in this or that. And this is totally different from today, that I am kind of some authority or something, and people come to me and ask me about some things I don't even know about, but I try to answer it. So this is different, This was not what I saw coming, but this has happened. As a private person, you are always working for yourself. You are working on something that you believe in, and you believe is correct. So the cooperation turns out to be a kind of how much do you give to the other person, how much does he give back, So it's a kind of you come together, and me and Olafur have found a way to come together. I think today it's very straight.
If you look at the studio, there is a kind of a palette of skills, a map of competences which makes the studio perform. My luck is that I'm not really good at anything, but I'm okay at everything. But that is, I would not have so many people working if I was, particularly good at something, right? I could have chosen to keep the studio completely secret and keep it very closed, and I could have claimed that I was more or less alone. I say this because that would have satisfied a certain market mechanism, but of course that would have been rather irresponsible, and it would probably have caused a lot of frustration within the studio, and it would not have been ethical, and so of course it never even was a question. I think what a place like the studio does in a city lays in to what extent people know what will happen, or how can they predict. So something unpredictable can actually be the carrier of criticism in a certain way. By being unpredictable, you're not exactly a psychopath, but you are in that same way. There is that little psychopathic element that people are looking at you and they just don't know what you're going to do, right? The moment it becomes predictable, you also lose degree of friction with your surroundings. Compared to the real world, the studio is pretty experimental. Compared to something really experimental, we are probably a little more pragmatic. But just in terms of that, we are also, a little bit unpredictable.
I think the model room is the legacy of our cooperation, so to speak. It's the legacy, yeah. The model room was not built on a purpose. We didn't say, oh, let's build a model room. It just happened to be that there were so many models piling up from different kind of projects. So suddenly Olafur had this idea, I think it's a genius idea, to say, oh, let's make an art piece out of it. In the model room, there are many, many models that never became any art pieces. They are there. There are maybe 3 groups of models. There are models of pieces that are already art pieces. There is a second group of models that is study of this art piece being made, and then there's a third group of models that is a proposal for something that's never executed. If you do a model, you do it for better understanding what you're talking about. You're talking about something, you have an idea, and this idea in your head is maybe not 3D, or it's just an idea, kind of, you have a feeling about something or whatever. And this 3D study is just to materialize the idea. And then you can say, no, this is not what I meant something else, and then you can go on from that.
The tendency when one asks about a model in the model room is that the language with which one asks, you're somewhat determining that the model has a kind of rather conservative purpose as a little sculpture, right? And it's very important to somehow fight against this very strange economy of this sort of nice little objects in a Wunderkammer. I do think that what is exciting about the models is that each of them, in one way or the other, presents an attempt to solve a problem. But a problem is not an autonomous, let's say, configuration of time and space. It is a way to kind of tie in time and society together. So every model somehow represents a conflict with society, you could say, or with the time in which we live. And it was an attempt in one way or the other to kind of present a sort of a non-formalistic or non-modern or non-utopic or very utopic or very formal or very modern, a way of, almost like a sort of a dialogue with the time in which it took place. So that means the potential of the model is not in the intrinsic proportional quality within the model. It is how this intrinsic proportional quality performs on a much greater scale. What we normally would call the finished object, it's also a model, it's also an experiment. It is also temporal in the sense that it performs over time, and it might collapse physically or ideologically and so on and so forth. So that means I have come to like every stage of a model more, acknowledging that it will never not be a model. If you look at a model and you see that there is a kind of geometric language in there, I think this geometric language does different things. We are in a society which is pretty much organized around a certain spatial language, and that spatial language has a kind of a cultural and political history and so on and so forth. I think people make the mistake, generally speaking, to take this for granted as being a set of truth. And what a successful geometric or spatial language can do is that it can break this paradigm of truthfulness into understanding that also the values with which we live today are in fact constructions. Some geometric spatial experiments could do this quite efficiently by introducing a set of rules or principles or kind of performative ideas as a sense of criticism, not necessarily replacing one truth with another truth, because I'm afraid of this, but essentially showing that what we consider truth or take for granted as being reality are in fact relative to our engagement. And this is where I think, say, alternative spatial principles such as different geometric models or ideas or mathematical or spatial or scientific ways of defining space, they can both, well, they can hold so much potential, but one of the greatest potential is the way you would actually introduce them to the world. And I think there one should be careful not to do the same mistake as the one we are currently surrounded by, namely to claim that we have the right answers for everything. For the time being, at least, it's more interesting for me to use this, let's say, alternative spatial phenomena or language to show that what we take for granted as being reality is not at all real. A geometric language, a principle of phenomena, can actually have a highly productive impact on the surroundings. And suddenly anybody who has a non-Euclidean way of saying things, such as Einar, is capable of having consequences which goes beyond geometric questions. It is very much linked to the world. It's only the question about how does one then put it in the world, or how does one take an idea and translate it into a frictional phenomena that actually produces time.